Okay, please. Could you please confirm if you can see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so the last chapter we want to cover, and please remain muted. Thank you. The last chapter that we want to cover is chapter 11, and that's related to project management. And the problems coming from project management are very interesting and also very practical. Probably all of you will need these skills in at least one of your future projects. So it's good that you know how to manage that. It's good to know how to use it. And also, that's one of the skills that um, all the companies that need to hire people will ask you about that. So it's good that you know how to do that. And this is, exactly mentioned after our last lecture. If you remember, in the last lecture, we were talking about network models. So project management is a kind of network model. I will explain it later. So let's start the very interesting chapter. Learning objectives understand how to plan, monitor, and control projects with the use of PERT and CPM. So these are two techniques that you will learn today. Determine earliest start, earliest finish, latest start, latest finish, and a slack time of each activity, along with the total project completion time and total project cost. So these are the goals that we will cover. The rest of them, which is how to reduce the total project time and budget and understanding the importance of software, so they will not be covered in your final exam. So only the first two will be covered, and it will not be in your exam. Okay, so we want to learn PERT CPM uh, and also PERT cost. We will not cover crashing and also other topics in project management. And even the cost will not be that much covered in this course. So introduction, let's start from this concept that if a project is small, definitely everybody can easily manage that. Okay, for example, how do you want to come from your home to school? Okay, so it's not a very complicated project. You may know which tool you want to use, which vehicle you want to use. Do you want to use bus or your own vehicle? Then you need to know when the bus arrives, and then you will take the bus and all the steps. So it's not very complicated. Or when you want to cook a food, for example, it's not very difficult. You have to buy some vegetables or material, and then you have to clean them, wash them, and then you have to cut them. Next step is cooking, and finally serving. So there are certain steps. Each of these steps has its own time, and there is also a sequence of activities. You cannot start cooking without having the material. Okay, so material should be purchased first. So there is a sequence of activities. However, when it comes to large scale and complicated projects, it's very difficult that you don't plan for it. So you need a planning. You need to think about that in advance and find a solution to manage that. So managing large scale complicated projects effectively is a difficult problem, and the stakes are high. So there's a high chance that you fail if you don't take it seriously. So you need to use some tools. The first step is planning and scheduling a project. The first step in planning and scheduling a project is to develop the work breakdown structure, or WBS. Work breakdown structure, or WBS. This is the first thing that everybody who wants to study project management should know, that WBS. So WBS is a small pieces of a project after you break down the entire large project into a smaller ones. Okay, so do you remember the example of cooking? For example, purchasing the material is one WBS. Okay, then let's say is one activity in the WBS list. Washing them and cutting them, that's another activity in the WBS. So we are breaking down, cutting the large project into smaller pieces. And these smaller pieces should have a meaning, okay? So you need to make sure that, uh, for example, you cannot divide the cooking into two sections, okay? You need to divide it into one section because that should be coherent. Okay, so making WBS is the first step. Then what else you need to do? Identify activities that must be performed and their beginning and start and ending events. Okay, so you should identify all individual activities and how long would it take to make that. So if you need washing for 2 minutes, if you need cutting for 5 minutes, if you need, let's say, making the food in half an hour, so that's something that you need to find out. So the beginning and ending of each of these events should be uh, identified. Then you have to identify the time of each activities. After time, how much cost each of them will require. Sometimes time and cost are related, sometimes they are not related, so you have to find out. Resource requirements. So which resources you need, okay? So for example, if you want to purchase, you need to use a bus, for example, to go for shopping, or you may need gas for your car in order to drive to any shopping center. Predecessors, so these are activities that are coming before and after an activity, so the sequence of activities. So it's very important. Without considering predecessors, you will fail a proper scheduling of activities. And people also is a kind of resource, but sometimes we consider human resources separately. So people responsible for each activity. So as you can see, planning and scheduling a project needs a lot of efforts. You have to identify WBS. After that, you have to identify activities and beginning and ending of the event. For example, you want to start cooking at a certain time and finish cooking at a certain time. Identify the time required for each activity, the cost of each activity, resource requirement. So when you go shopping, what are the resources you need? You need money, you need a bag, you need a car, whatever. And what are the activities before and after an activity? Which people are responsible for each of activities. Sometimes one person is doing all of that. Sometimes only one of them is one person is doing, sometimes multiple person. And finally, a schedule for the project uh, can be developed based on the above information. So after you have all of this information, you can go to step number 4 and find a proper schedule for all of these activities. Okay, after we understand that what are the steps that we need to do in project management, so it's time to learn some techniques. One of those techniques is the program evaluation and review technique, which is summarized as PERT. So program evaluation and review technique. There is a second technique called critical path method, or CPM. So these two techniques are two popular and commonly used methods in large and complex projects. Let's review more details about them. PERT uses the three-time estimation to develop a probabilistic estimate of the completion time. So for each activity in PERT technique, we need 3 times, which I will tell you in next slides. But the reason is that PERT is good when we are not sure about the completion time of each activity, when we are not sure how long would it take to finish an activity, okay? So if we are sure that, for example, doing a certain activity takes 2 hours, so that's easy, yeah? It's very easy. Um, you will you just use 2 hours. But sometimes you are not sure about that. You would say it may finish as early as 1 hour. it may finish as long as 5 hours. And in average, in previous uh, tries, I could finish it in 2 hours. Okay, so you have 3 times, and we are not sure that this time how long would it take. Then you need to use PERT technique. Okay, so PERT uses three time estimates in order to find out how long would it take to complete the project. CPM is a more deterministic technique. It means that the time of each activity is clear. Okay, the time of each activity is clear. So when you say I am teaching, that when you say I am working, when you say I am studying, all of them, the time of all of them is exactly clear. Okay, and they are very similar to each other. I mean, PERT and CPM, they use the same concept, they use the same steps. So that's why sometimes in some reference books or in some textbooks, they mix them together and they call them PERT CPM technique. Okay, PERT CPM technique. And here we want to use the PERT CPM technique in this course. Okay, so that's something that we need to learn about that. Sixth step of paired CPM. Number one, define the project and all of its significant activities or tasks. So this is something that we already discussed about. We have to define the project and all of its significant activities or tasks. So it kind of break down the project into smaller pieces. So what do we call? We call the activity of cutting the project in smaller pieces. I would repeat the question. What do we call the activity of cutting the project into smaller pieces?
Work breakdown
WP.
structure.
WPS, that's right. WPS, work breakdown structure. So in this technique or in this method, we cut the project in smaller pieces. Number two, develop the relationship among the activities. Decide which activity must precede others, okay? So which activity should be done first? Because sometimes you cannot do all activities in row and you cannot do all activities in parallel. So you need to consider a kind of relationship between activities, okay? So sometimes two activities should start at the same time. Sometimes two activities should finish at the same time, okay? So you cannot ignore this relationship between activities. This is mostly a kind of technical job, so the people who have some technical knowledge should let you what is the sequence of activities. In this course, I will provide you a table that shows the relationship between activities. Number three, draw the network connection. Draw the network connecting all of the activities. Then you have to draw all the activities. So do you remember I was talking about network models? So this is the time that we should show activities in terms of nodes and also in terms of arcs. So that's another slide I will show you next. So we need to draw a network. Number four, assign time and cost estimates to each activity. So you have to write down on that diagram or on that network that how much time would it take to finish a job and how much is the cost of that. So this way, by just one look at the project, at the network, you will see how the work is going on. Step number five, compute the longest time pass through the network. This is called the critical path. The critical path. Okay, in order to better understand what is the idea of critical path. So let's say you are three friends, you want to go to a party, okay? One of you, and you have one car, okay? So you have to go by one car. One of you have a car. And um, Let's say one of you takes half an hour to get ready, another person takes 45 minutes, another person takes 1 hour. So when can you go to the party? How early you can go to the party? So I'm going to repeat. It looks that I have to repeat everything. Let's say you are three friends, all of you are going to a party. You are going by one car or you want to take a taxi, whatever, doesn't matter. Then one of you takes half an hour, another person takes 45 minutes, and another person takes 1 hour. So
One
let's
hour.
say let's say it's 6 p.m. So when should you call the cab to be in front of your home?
7 p.m. I
7
guess.
p.m.
7 p.m. Okay, so that's the idea behind critical path. So you cannot ignore some activities. You should be fair, yeah. You should consider that some activities take longer time. Okay, so those activities, and the guy who finishes at half an hour, how much extra that person has in order to relax or do
Half an
something?
hour.
Another half an hour. And the guy who finished in 45 minutes, how much extra time
15
he?
minutes.
15 minutes. Excellent. So that extra 15 minutes is called slack time. Okay, slack time. So that extra half an hour or 40 or 15 minutes can be used for other purposes. For example, that person can do other activities. Okay, so that's all the idea behind critical path method. And finally, number 6, use the network to help plan, schedule, monitor, and also control the project. Okay, so what's the difference between monitoring a project and controlling a project? Anybody knows that?
Monitoring project, I guess, to check the each and every activity doing by someone else. And what's the other term? Sorry, I forgot that.
Monitoring and controlling.
And controlling like whatever happen in the project. If anything goes wrong, you have to give the some instruction to the whoever doing that things so they can do it again and do it properly. If I'm not wrong.
Okay, thank you. So by monitoring means having and keeping your eyes on all individual activities. So this is an activity that an engineer or a person does in a project. So he or she keeps his or her eyes continuously on activities, then tracks which activity is done on time, which activity is done wrong, and prepares some activities, some reports like that. Controlling a project means that you also consider the budget, you also consider, the challenges that could happen in the project and brought some compensation plans for the project. Okay, so maybe you need to reschedule, maybe you need to crash the project. For example, what do we mean by crashing a project? Crashing is an activity of making the project shorter. Okay, so sometimes you need to put more resources to make a project shorter. Okay, so that's something that is called controlling a project. Okay, so that's the difference between monitoring and controlling. So monitoring is an ongoing activity. This is not very comprehensive compared to controlling a project. Okay, critical path is important since any delay in these activities can delay the completion of the project. Okay, so remember the example of going to the party. If the guy who takes 1 hour to finish the job, if that person takes 5 minutes delay, so what will happen?
For the 1 hour guy, right? If I'm not wrong,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah. So if the all will be get late for 5 minutes, so it would
that's
be the
right.
total time would be 1 hour and 5 minutes.
That's right. What about the guy who takes half an hour to complete or to get ready? If that person is 5 minutes late, what will happen?
The time would be same, I guess, because a half an hour guy take 35 minutes, but the 1 hour guy
Just
take
like
only 1 hour, so it would be the same time.
Yeah, so it will not impact the total length of the project. So there can be still go at 7 p.m. Good. So that's the idea. Yeah, some activities are on critical paths, so they cannot be delayed. Some activities are not on critical paths, so they are okay to be delayed. How long? As much as their slack time. Okay, so that's the concept I'm going to open right now. So Hertz CPM technique is a very, very useful technique. You cannot imagine how many problems can be solved, how many questions can be answered using this technique. So just imagine you are a manager, just imagine you are managing a large project and you need an engineer to report to you. You need a person, you need a worker, you need a hired person to give you some reports. Let's review what nice reports you can ask from that person. Number one, when will the entire project be completed? This is the most basic question, yeah? So how long would it take that we have this project? 10 weeks, 20 weeks, 1 year? So that's the idea behind this question. Number two, what are the critical activities or tasks in the project that is the ones that will delay the entire project if they are late? So what are those items? What are those activities on critical path method? Okay, that if they are delayed, you should the entire project gets delayed. Okay, so if you are a manager and you have recently hired one new person, and this is just a new person you want to use in a project, and you know that a project that is on one activity that is on critical path method needs one person, and one activity that is not on critical path method also needs a person. So initially you will assign that person to which of these two activities?
For the critical project.
For the critical activity, that's right. So the project, the activity that is on the critical path. Why? Because, based on what we discussed, you know that any delay on the critical path would delay the entire project. So it's better that if you have extra resources, if you have more efforts, you need to put them on critical activities, the activities that are on the critical path. Number three, which are the non-critical activities, that is the ones that can run late without delaying the entire project's completion. So in this case, you know that some activities are not delaying the projects up to a certain threshold. So for example, you can delay them 1 day, 2 days, that's fine. So if you know those activities, it gives you some flexibility, okay? For example, if you don't have enough people today, you may leave the person who is working on non-critical activity to critical activities. Then you will save the critical activities, yeah? Because you are playing with your human resources, you are playing with your resources, any types of resources. For example, you have an excavation machine, and today you know that the non-critical activity can be delayed up to 2 days. So you will use that excavation machine to another activity which is on critical path. Okay, so that's the property of knowing what are critical activities and what are non-critical activities. Number four, if there are three estimates, if there are three time estimates, for example, one of them says you will finish in 1 hour. Another estimate says that, oh, you're on a bad luck. Probably you will finish in 5 days. And another estimate gives you, based on our previous experience, you will finish in 2 days. So how can you find a proper time to represent the completion time of this activity? Okay. So if there are three time estimates, what is the probability that the project will be completed by a specific date? Okay. So you are able to calculate the probability of that. Next question, question number 5. At any particular date, is the project on a schedule, behind the schedule, or ahead of schedule? This is also very critical for managers. Although I'm not going to cover it in the lecture, but the slides are there. You can go ahead and learn about that. But again, this is a very basic question. This is something that is called monitoring the project. So you want to keep your eye on projects and make sure that they are doing on time. And if they are behind the schedule, how can you make it faster? How can you crash the project? If you are ahead of the project, ahead of time, or ahead of resources, so what else you can do? Number 6, on any given date, is the money spent equal to, less than, or greater than the budget amount? So are you behind the budget? Are you above, over budgeted? Are you under budgeted? Or you are at the right place? So you can look at the projects from the time perspective and also from the budget perspective. So that's the good thing about PERT CPM technique. Number 7, are there enough resources available to finish the project on time? Do you have enough resources? So what do you do in this case? You will estimate how many days of the projects are remaining and how much resources they need, and then you compare it with available resources that you have. Okay, so this way you are able to compare them with each other. Okay, anyway, we are not going to cover these last questions. We will cover question number 1, 2, 4. Okay, in order to better learn this technique, I want to open and discuss this example. This is a general foundry example. This is a foundry that makes some products. You know that the foundries are normally very environmentally, um, they impact the environment a lot because they have to burn fossil fuels and they make a lot of pollutions. So General Foundry Incorporation has long been trying to avoid the expenses of installing air pollution and control equipment. So they were trying to skip from installing the equipment and making the environment clean. However, the local government has forced them that the deadline is done. So you are due to install a new filtering system in 16 weeks. So if you do not install the new filtering system in 16 weeks, you have to close your factory. Okay, so this looks a very harsh deadline. If you finish this project in 17 weeks, so probably you will fail. Okay, so you have to close your factory. And you know, in manufacturing, we don't like to close the factory because that's a lot of cost. So General Foundry was warned that if that it will be forced to close unless the device is installed in the allotted period, which means 16 weeks. They want to make sure that installation of the filtering system processes smoothly and on time. So they want to make sure everything goes on time. These are the tables. This is the table and list of activities that is normally given to you in any projects. So if it is not given to you, what should you do? I don't mean in the I don't mean in the course. I mean in general, in the real world. You have to use WBS, okay? You have to break down activities to smaller pieces, find the sequence of activities. That is exactly what you see in this table. So activities and immediate procedures for general foundry. So each activity is listed and what is the immediate activity after that, okay? So activity A is called building internal components. Activity. Is there any activity before that?
No.
No, there is no activity before that. B, modifying roof and floor. Is there any activity before that?
No.
There is no activity. Okay. And what about activity C? So construct collection stack. So what is the activity before that?
K.
Activity A. So can you start activity C before activity A is completed?
No.
No, you cannot. So that's the meaning of immediate predecessors. Okay, so you need to make sure that you know that you consider that in your tables, in your uh, uh, project planning. Okay, so after we know all of the activities, for example, look at here. Activity G cannot be completed before both D and E are completed. Okay, so it means that you need to make sure that these two activities are finished first, and then you can go to activity G. Okay, so the first step is having WBS or list of activities and what is the sequence of activities. After you have this, you need to draw the paired CPM network. Okay, draw the paired CPM network. Here you will learn that there are two methods to do that. Number one is called activity on node, AON, activity on node. Okay, this is the most common approach, and we also will use that. The other one is activity on arc or AOA. This is not very common. Okay, so in activity on node, we put activities on nodes, and on activity on arc, we put activities on arcs. So what is the idea here? Do you remember in network problems, we have a set of circles? What do we call circles? Anybody who remembers just 1 week ago? What do we call circles?
Nodes.
Nodes, perfect. So these are nodes. There are some nodes that we have in a project. And then we connect them to each other. What do we call these connections?
Arcs.
Arc.
These are arcs, perfect. And if the activities are written on the arcs, this is called activity on arc. If the activities are written on nodes, we call them activity on nodes. Based on the experience, activity on node is the best method and people don't get confused. Okay, so we will use this method. And one node represents the start of the project and one node for the end of the project. So do you see any start node and end node here? Yes or no?
Yes.
What is the start node? You don't see anything here. Okay, so a
Okay.
start node and finish nodes are two extra nodes that we will add. Okay, start nodes and finish node. So these are two extra nodes that we will add um, in order to uh, draw the CPM paired network. Okay, and the arcs are used to show the sequence or predecessors for each activity. For example, let's say this is activity G, for example. So in order to activity G be started, this activity, this activity, and this activity should be completed. Okay, you cannot start it before these three activities are completed. And these arrows or these arcs represent the relationship between activities. Okay, so if I want to draw what we have seen in this table, then it will be something like this. Okay, so activity A is building internal components. Okay, this is activity A. And then activity B is modifying roof and floor. So these two activities are independent. They are not related. There is no activity before them. Okay, so that's why they are starting separately. However, activity C cannot be started before activity A is completed. Okay, this is exactly what we see here. Activity C cannot be completed before activity A is completed. Okay, so that's what we see here. And the same, for example, activity G cannot be completed before activity E is completed, or activity D and activity D is completed. That's the way that we see here. D and E should be completed before you start activity G. Okay, clear for everyone how we draw this table? So always start from a node which you call it a start. Okay, after you write that, then you will write right after the start, you will write the activities that do not have any immediate predecessors. Okay, so you will you will start writing activity A and B. So these two will be your first activities. Then you will follow the instruction one by one. So after A and B, you will go to C, then you will go to D, and one by one you will complete and connect them based on the sequence of activities given to you. Okay, and after everything is finished, so don't forget to put a final node which is called finish node. Okay, so this way you are able to draw the paired CPM network. Any questions from your side?
No.
Clear for everyone? Because this is very important. If you're not able to
Yes.
draw the actually map, draw the network, you're not able to answer the next questions. So this step is absolutely important because based on the WBS provided to you, okay, something like this table, you're able to draw network, and based on the network, you will do some calculations. Okay, so what is the next step? Next step is to write the completion time of its activity. So in some situations, activity times are known with certainty. For example, you know it takes 2 weeks. For sure, you know that. Sometimes you're not sure. Okay, sometimes it takes 1 week, sometimes it takes 5 weeks, sometimes, but in average, it takes 2 weeks. So these are two totally different ways that time is given to you. In the first one here, so this is called the activity time are known with certainty. So you exactly know how much is the completion time of one activity. And in some cases, there is uncertainty about activity times. So when there is uncertainty about activity times, it will be something like the second case, okay? So you are not sure exactly how an activity, how long would take from your side to complete an activity. Okay, so depending on we are on case number 1 or case number 2, in terms of time completion, we will have different approaches. So if we know exactly when the time will be completed, CPM assigns just one time estimates to each activity. And that way you are able to calculate the critical path. That's it, very easy. But when there is uncertainty, okay, when there is uncertainty about the time, PERT employs a probability distribution, okay, a probability distribution based on 3 time estimates for each activity. And a weighted average of these estimates is used for the time estimates, and this is used to determine the critical path. Okay, so calculating the critical path when you have uncertainty is not as easy as when you exactly know when when activity is done. Okay, so because the first one is very easy, let's learn about the second one. In the second one, which is the PERT, and when we have probability distribution, how should we find the time? First of all, we should know that we will be given 3 times, okay? Time number 1, time number 2, and time number 3. Time number 1 is called the optimistic time. We also show it using A, optimistic time. So this is the time an activity will take if everything goes as well as possible. So this is the shortest time to complete these activities. We know that in many cases this is not realistic. Okay, so as we can say, there is only 1% chance that this case happens. However, that is possible, yeah, although it's 1%, which is a very low probability, but that is possible. So the minimum time that you can finish an activity is called A. And number two, pessimistic time. This is totally opposite of A. So B, which is pessimistic, is the opposite of A. This is the worst possible time to complete an activity. If nothing goes well, if everything is wrong, what is the worst case to complete a job? Okay, that is called B or pessimistic. And finally, you have the most likely time or M, most likely time. This is something that you have from your previous experiences in other projects. So you want to consider that when you are trying to estimate the time as well. So you know that in average, in other projects, it will take you a certain time. So you also trust that and you will add it as more realistic time estimate. Okay, PERT often assumes the time estimates follow a beta probability distribution. So what is the usefulness of knowing this note? So what is the value of that? The value that PERT assumes the time estimate follows beta probability distribution is that I assume that average of the time, okay, and also standard deviation of the time, okay, these these are using beta probability distribution. So I'm going to use the formula of beta distribution in order to calculate the average and standard deviation of activities. That's the value of that. Okay, so this is the shape of beta distribution. And in beta distribution, we have the most optimistic time, which we presented as A. We have the most pessimistic time, which we represented as B. So the longest time that the project can be completed, and also the most likely time. So this is what you have witnessed in other projects. So this is the most likely time. Okay, so if you just remember what you have passed in a statistics course, so you may know what is the formula for average and also mean and standard deviation of beta probability distribution. So the expected activity time, which we represent it as T, okay, T, can be calculated using these three times. The most optimistic one, the pessimistic one, and also the most likely one. However, look at the coefficient. What is the coefficient of optimistic time?
1,
1. What is the coefficient of most likely one?
4,
4. And finally, the last one, which is 1 again. Okay. And 1 plus 4 plus 1 will be 6. So all of them will be divided by 6. So this way, I am able to calculate what? Expected activity time. So what is the time that I should expect that this activity be completed? Expected activity time. Okay. And besides that, I know that in any probability distribution, we calculate mean and also we calculate what? Standard deviation. So how can I calculate variance and standard deviation? So I first show you how to calculate variance, and then from variance you can find the standard deviation. So variance is calculated as the pessimistic time minus the optimistic time divided by 6 squared. Okay, so this is the formula that you use in order to calculate the variance. And after you calculated the variance, you are able to calculate the standard deviation. So how can I calculate the standard deviation? Standard
Under
deviation,
root of variance.
yes, that's the square root of variance. Okay, square root of variance is the standard deviation. That's it. So that's all you need in order to complete uh, in order to calculate the time of activities. So again, let's go back. Sometimes you're lucky and only one time is given to you. For example, this activity takes 2 days, 2 hours, whatever, to complete it. Sometimes there are some doubts, there are some uncertainties related to completion time. In this case, you have to calculate the expected time, expected completion time, and also you have to calculate the standard deviation or variance of activities. So because we know that it follows beta distribution, I'm going to use the formula for calculating expected uh, value or average in beta distribution. I know if I go back to reference books, the formula for mean or expected value in beta distribution is the best time plus 4 multiply um, most likely time plus pessimistic time divided by 6, and also uh, the range or the variance of activity completion is the worst case minus the best case divided by 6 squared. Okay, so this way I am able to calculate the times. So in this case, as you can see, the times are given to me. You shouldn't be worried about the time. All of these times will be given to you. Okay, all of these times will be given to you. So activity A, in the best case, it takes 1 day. In the worst case, it takes 3 days. But we know that in average, it takes 2 days. So I just need to put it in the formula of A plus 4M plus B divided by 6. Then I will find that the expected completion time is 2 days for activity A. Also, I know the formula for variance is b minus a divided by 6. So 3 minus 1 divided by 6 squared. So it will be 4 divided by 36. The same for other activities. So I am able to calculate the activities, the completion time or expected time of each activities. So a question, if I use PERT method, how long would it take that I do all of these activities?
Well,
How long?
12,
12? How did you got 12?
25 weeks.
25 weeks. Okay. Any other ideas? Anybody else in the class want to contribute? So what is the expected time of each activity? That's this column, yeah? So somebody would say that let's add all the completion times together, and then we have 25 weeks in order to complete this project. But what do you think if we go with 25 weeks? Can we keep the factory open or it will be shut down?
It will shut down.
It will shut down, yes. So what should we do? What is the problem here? Any idea? Just think about that. Anybody? Do you have any idea what is the problem? What can we do? Because this way, definitely the factory will be closed. Because it should be less than 16 weeks.
So here we find the non-critical activities and remove them so that
Remove
we can
non.
reduce the expected time.
Can we remove non-critical activities from a project? Yes or no?
No.
No, we cannot. We have to do all of them, but we have some flexibility for non-critical activities. We cannot remove them. We can just play with them a little bit.
Prioritize.
Yes, that's right. So this way that you're just adding them all together, we are ignoring the sequence of activities. We are ignoring them. Maybe some activities can be done in parallel. Okay? And this way we can save the time. Okay, so that's the next step. Now we know that what is the time of activities and what is the variance of activities. Now let's move to the next step. What is the next step? We are going to use the network, the paired CPN network, and write down the activities. Okay, write down how long would it take to do each activities, when is the start time, when is the finish time, and then calculate the total completion time of a project. Because as you mentioned, initially I can say 25 weeks, but this way I am ignoring the sequence of activities, predecessors of activities. So I have to put those numbers that I calculated on this column, okay, on this column, on this table, on this network. Okay, so how long would take activity A to be completed? 2 weeks. So I'm going to write 2 weeks here. Okay. And how long activity G would take to do that?
5 weeks.
5 weeks. So I'm going to write 5 from here on this table and the rest of activities. Okay. Just pay attention that two activities which are start and finish, they are dummy. They are not realistic activities. Yeah. So that's why the time required for start and finish is equal to
0.
0. That's right. So the time you need to for activity start and finish is 0. Okay, so what should I do now? How to find the critical path? We accept the expected completion time for each task as the actual time. The total of 25 weeks does not take into account that some of the tasks could be taking place at the same time. To find out how long the project will take, we perform the critical path analysis for the network. So we want to learn how to do critical path analysis. The critical path is the longest path through the network. Can you imagine? I just bring this question in final exam, and many people fail to answer this question. The critical path is the longest path through the network. Okay, so it's like going to a party. That's the longest time that one of the guys needs to get prepared. Okay, to find out the critical path, determine the following quantities for each activity. So 4 calculations should be done for each activity. Activity A, B, C, D, E up to G, H, whatever. So we need to calculate these 4 times for each of them. The first one is the earliest start, or we also show it as ES, okay, earliest start. Earliest start is the earliest time that an activity can be started without violation of immediate predecessor's requirement, without violating the previous activity to be finished, okay? So that's the earliest time that you can start a project. Then we have earliest finish, or EF, earliest finish. The earliest time at which an activity can be ended, okay? The earliest time that an activity can be finished. We are all talking about individual activities. Number 3, the largest start time, or LS, largest start. The largest time an activity can begin without delaying the entire project. So the largest time that an activity can begin without impacting the entire project. Okay. And the latest finish, LF, is the latest time an activity can end without delaying the entire project. Okay, I know it could be a little bit, tough for you at this moment that how should I calculate all of this for numbers? But let me just bring the example of going to the party and then I will ask you to calculate the activities. So in the example of party, so let's say this is 6 p.m. Okay, this is 6 p.m. And you're supposed to go to the party by 7 p.m. Okay, so you're gonna call the cab by 7 p.m. The first person needs 1 hour. Okay, 1 hour to complete the activity. The second person um, needs 45 minutes, and the last person needs half an hour, 30 minutes. This is also 45 minutes. Okay, a question. What is the earliest time that the first person can start getting prepared?
1 hour.
What is the earliest time in terms of hour that the first person can start? 6 p.m. Yeah, correct?
Yes,
What is
Professor.
the Yes, what is the earliest time that the first person can start preparing? That's 6 p.m. What is the earliest time that the second person can start getting prepared? Earliest start. This is, to be
6:30.
honest, this is elementary concept. Elementary. In elementary school, it's, I don't know how to mention that. So the second person, what is the earliest time this guy can start? Earliest time that this person can start getting prepared?
6:30.
So when all of the people are silent, so it means that everybody agrees with 6:30 for the second person?
6:15.
No.
6:40.
Okay.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. That's the correct answer. The earliest time that the second person can start is 6 p.m. Earliest start is 6 p.m. What about the third person? What is the earliest time that the third person can start?
6 p.m.
6
6
p.m.
p.m. 6 p.m. Earliest start. Everybody understand the concept of earliest start? That's the meaning of the earliest time you can start a project. Okay. What about the earliest finish? What is the earliest finish? The earliest time that you can finish the activity. Let's go for the first person.
7
7
p.m.
p.m.
7 p.m. Perfect. What is the earliest finish for the second person?
6:45.
6:45. What is the earliest finish for third person?
6:30.
6:30. Perfect. And let's go for the third one, which is the latest start. What is the latest start for the first person?
7
6
p.m.
p.m.
Latest start.
6
If
p.m.
you start 7 p.m., so you will go to the party at 8 p.m., yeah? Is it right? So
Yeah,
are you
that's
always delayed in
no.
parties? Okay. So the latest start is for the first person,
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Perfect. And what is the latest start for the second person?
6:15.
6:15.
6:30.
6 6:15 is correct because it takes 45 minutes and it should be finished before 7. And what is the latest start for the third person?
6:30.
6:30. That's right. Okay. So let's move to the last one, which is the latest finish. What is the latest finish for the first one?
7 p.m.
That's right. Latest finish for second person.
6:45.
Latest.
7.
7. And latest finish for the third person.
7.
7.
7. Okay, so all I was trying to show you was an example in real life that makes it easy, but I hope that I'm not making the concept more complicated. Anyway, so let's see. So how to find the critical path? Activity times are represented in the nodes. Yes, we know that. So in each node, we have a box like this. Yeah, do you remember? We have a box like this. So if I go back, we have a box like this. Here we write the name of each activity, then the completion, expected completion time. And then we have also, so if it is a box, we have 4 more items to be written. So what are those 4 that we should write? So we will write earliest start and earliest finish in the middle row. And in the third row, we write latest start and latest finish of each activities. Okay. So how to find out and how to calculate these earliest start, earliest finish, latest start and latest finish of activities. First of all, these two numbers, earliest start and earliest finish, are calculated in forward calculations. Okay, in forward calculations. And these two numbers, which are latest start and latest finish, these two numbers are calculated in backward calculations. Okay, backward calculations. So it means that we have two steps in order to calculate these numbers: forward calculation and backward calculation. In forward calculation, we start everything that has the word E, yeah, earliest start and earliest finish. So earliest times are computed as earliest finish time is equal to earliest start time plus the expected activity time. So what is the earliest? Earliest finish is calculated as when is the earliest start of the activity plus the length of that. So if the earliest start of an activity is 6 p.m. and it takes 45 minutes, okay, it takes, let's say, 45 minutes. So when is the earliest finish of the activity? 7 p.m.?
6:45.
Okay, 6:45. Okay, that's the earliest finish of an activity. The same if it is 1 hour, if this is 30 minutes, this is the way that we calculate the earliest finish of activity. However, somebody may say, how can I calculate the earliest start? Earliest start is the largest of the earliest finish times of immediate predecessors. So you have to, so in order to calculate this one, I have to look at the previous activities. The largest activity before this activity, so the earliest finish of the largest activity before this activity represents the earliest start of this activity. Okay, that's the concept here. And earliest start is calculated as largest earliest finish of immediate predecessors of this activity. So I will show you in an example. So this is given to us. Earliest start can be easily calculated by looking at the previous activities. The longest time that it takes to finish the previous activities will be considered as the earliest start to finish these activities. Okay. And how to calculate earliest finish? We have a formula for that. Earliest finish is calculated as earliest start plus completion time. Okay, T. So this way I'm able to calculate all requirements for the forward calculations. For example, I know that um, start has 0 time, yeah? 0, it has no time. Then it goes to A and B. So when it is 0, so earliest start of activity A can be also 0. I can right away start activity A. So earliest start of activity A is 0. And how long would it take to do activity A? 2 weeks. So earliest finish would be 0, this one, plus duration of activity. So it will be 2 weeks. The same for the other one, activity B. So because it's just connected to the start node, so earliest start of that is 0. So earliest finish of activity is earliest start plus completion time, which is 3 weeks. So it takes 3 weeks to complete this activity. Done. Okay, very easy. Any questions from this slide?
No.
Okay, I hope it's clear for everyone. And if I continue, I can calculate the rest of that. So let's say I'm in activity C, and you know that these numbers are not given to me, okay? This is something that I have to complete. So what is the earliest start of activity C? The earliest start of activity C, earliest start of activity C is equal to earliest finish of activity before that. What is the earliest finish of activities before that? Activity A, correct? How much is the earliest finish of activity A?
2.
2.
2. 2, that's it. So it will be 2. So I'm going to write 2 here. And how long would it take to complete activity C?
2 weeks.
2.
2 weeks. So it will be 2 plus 2. So it will be 4 weeks. So earliest finish of activity C is 4 weeks. Okay. And the same for E. Can you tell me that how can I find the earliest start of activity E? So earliest start of activity E is the largest time of activities before that. Earliest finish of the activities before that. There is only one activity before that, so it will be only 4. Okay, there is a very important trick here. When you have 2 arrows or 3 arrows going to one box, to one node, okay? So how can I find the earliest finish? Earliest finish of activity, let's say G. How can I find that?
The largest
Because
of the two boxes.
exactly. So what is the largest earliest finish of activity E? So this is the earliest finish of activity E is 8, and earliest finish of activity 4 is, sorry, earliest finish of activity D is 7. And between 7 and 8, because both of them, as you can see, there is an arrow going to activity G. So what is the largest number between 8 and 7?
8.
8. So
8.
you will write 8 here. And the rest of it is easy. Yeah, 8 plus 5 will be 13. Okay? So this is the way that you calculate earliest start and earliest finish. Okay, and then here I have 2 arrows going to node H. Okay, 2 arrows going to node H. So what is the earliest finish of activity F?
7.
7. What is the earliest finish of activity G?
13.
13. What is the maximum of them?
13.
13. So that's why I'm going to write 13 here. Okay. So in forward calculations, I consider the maximum time because I cannot start activity H before activity F and G finish. Correct? That's the idea. I cannot start activity H, this one, before F and G finishes. What is the earliest time that these two activities can finish? The earliest time is 13 weeks, correct? So that's the way that you calculate the earliest time and earliest finish of the projects. And finally, how long would it take to complete this project?
15.
15, that's the last one. So you can write that it takes 15 days to complete this project. and it start with 0 and finish with 50. So can I do something that I finish between 16 weeks?
Yes.
Yes. So that's a good news, okay? That's good news that I can finish before 16 weeks. Okay, if you remember, I told you we have forward calculations and backward calculations. So we are at the end of forward calculations. Then I'm going to show you backward calculations as well, but I believe it's a good idea we have a rest. So what time is it?
10:36.
10:33. Okay, so make sure that your time, your watch is working fine for your final exam, otherwise you will miss 3 minutes. So it's 10:33. Let's rest up to 10:45 and we will start at 10:45.